That fixed it.
Can you hear us?
I think it's better for everybody because people don't go to the Zoom site when they're taking the test to ask questions.
Right.
And a lot of times they get disadvantaged because of that. But if they're in class, it's much easier to just come up and talk to me. But I think it's actually better for the test takers.
All blurry for some reason. Michael here. I don't know, blurry for some reason.
So is it working?
Yeah, you're just blurry.
That's no problem. But the audio is okay, right?
Yeah, I think I use the filter.
That's the important part.
It's the camera. It's just crap. Sometimes it's gonna get clear.
So any business problems or school stuff anybody has?
Or can you move it closer?
You fixed it.
It's good now.
So I'm gonna do a slideshow. So don't worry about me until we. You have to get the screen and you have to be able to.
No, I'll sit right there.
He's got COVID.
I don't have COVID. He's the one that.
Hey, it was 100.2, not 102. I think that's okay. It shows you how it's not right.
Who was 100.2 tonight?
Take it again, just make sure.
You don't feel.
I feel dead inside, but that's because they just sell my. That's not good.
Yeah, a lot of things to explain that. I know.
99. See, I'm dropping.
Okay.
You could have been like 102 in like 10 minutes.
Hey, I'm hot stuff, all right.
So you guys are all young and it won't hurt you, but I'm the one who's young. If I get it from Mike, I'll kill him. And then he won't give it to anybody else after that.
From Mike.
I mean, Lewis.
Well deserved.
What is going on here? Come on.
We had this problem last week too.
Really?
Yeah, and then it works with James.
It just takes time, right? Did you just leave it and took time? Is that what happened?
I think they came in and did something.
You know, if we had it together, he would tell me.
Who?
Jim,
Oh, well, it was Rod.
or Rodney, whatever, whoever was here would tell the rest of us that they're having trouble with it.
With James's class, it worked. And now I guess it's not working.
If I don't do this, I can't do anything.
You could just.
It was working.
Huh?
You could read the word.
Working with 2 days.
Yeah, that's what I have to do.
It was working when you first came in. We had it up.
It was working. when I
Yeah.
first came.
Try turning it on, off, and then.
I don't think it's.
If it works, I'll do it. I don't think they're washing. You know, on main campus, they probably go around and inspect all that.
Oh, so you could use.
Yeah, periodically.
We're chopped liver over here.
We're chopped liver, nobody ever comes up here.
I'm gonna take it here. So probably-
See this thing, huh? Stuff here. Nothing?
Here, we can put on the laptop and we can all huddle around the laptop.
What's that?
We can put on the laptop and I'll huddle around the laptop real close. He can stay in the back of the class. We can put on Zoom from all the other folks.
That's not bad. Actually.
I brought my computer so I can prepare.
Everybody's got that. Or we could move to the back.
And do what?
Or project the color.
This thing, too. It's not.
How many classes have you gone to where?
But they never use the projector. wonder if we missed something when we were trying, when we were pressing that button.
No, see, that's actually buttons here. This is just a bar. On the right.
I don't know, it's probably diesel too, so
Okay.
probably.
Oh, yeah.
$5-6 a gallon.
Oh.
What do you do with that?
Go ahead, go read the thing.
I have concept.
Oh, yeah, no, I was going off that.
Oh, you want this?
Because I didn't know if it worked.
Gas is just-
Oh.
Yeah, gas is important.
So, Dylan?
Yeah.
Is that on the camera?
Yeah.
You might have to come up and see that.
John's having magic touch. What'd you do, John?
It's called the document. That's what I was trying to do. Yeah, right. Few
Oh,
times.
that's even worse.
So, who's on the mic and
Mike and Zach,
Zach?
the two people that.
Are they asking what it looks like to them?
It looks like a big white square. It's not visible.
Yeah, I can barely see it.
Okay, tell me when you can see it.
So,
I think you'd have
Mike
to
and
share
Zach, can you
screen.
hear me?
Oh, there you go. That's
Yeah, but that's a lot better.
Can they see the whole thing?
Okay, so don't move your chair to the right at all.
Mike and Zach, and also if you can get your handout that I sent out on a different screen, you can look at it as we also go through it.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've got three parts to this, and I think you got three separate handouts. First one's on insulation. Second one's on what is the second one on?
HVAC.
No, well, yeah, sort of, but plugging leaks in the building, and the third one's on ventilation and HVAC, kind of we used to them all. So this, I always start this lesson with, because insulation involves heat transfer. We've done a little bit with windows because there's heat transfer through windows, but now we want to do the main part of the house. So there's physics involved, but it's pretty simplified. So heat is the transfer of kinetic energy. So the definition of heat is kinetic energy, or excited atoms and molecules. When they start moving faster, that creates heat. That's the definition of heat. And radiation makes them move faster. So radiation isn't heat in itself. It's just electromagnetic waves. They're not hot or cold. But when they excite these atoms and make them move around, then that becomes warm. And those warm atoms start bumping into atoms in their container or next to them. That's why when the fuel hits the pan gets warm, then it heats the food up, and the air above it and everything keeps going. And that's what convection is. So the books and your book will talk about heat transfer as three kinds: radiation, which isn't technically heat, but they call it that because it causes heat. And everything radiates. Every piece of matter radiates. Your body radiates radiation just because it's matter. It's not very much. And on the other end are the stars, who have maximum radiation. It's incredible what they radiate. So most everything on Earth works on the radiation of the sun, obviously. Conduction, I don't know why I put solids and fluids there, because that's one of the things I wanted to specify. Conduction is those atoms and molecules excited and moving, and conduction just means they cause the ones next to them to move and down the line. So it's actually touching. The heat's actually touching and heating up whatever's next to it. But that goes for any medium, not just solids. Conduction works on water and air too. And that's a mistake. Most of the time they teach it they say that convection is air and water and conduction is only solid. Not true. Conduction works on any medium. If you have water that's boiling, it'll make the air above it warm. And that's conduction. It's got nothing to do with convection. So conduction is really the main form of heat transfer. Radiation will start conduction, and convection is actually the movement of air, right? When air heats up, air is just normally in the atmosphere. It doesn't fall, right? It doesn't rise. It just, ambient air just kind of stays where it is. That's why we can breathe. If it always rose or went to the earth, we couldn't breathe. It would go out of where our nose is. So ambient air just kind of stays there. And gravity keeps it at about, keeps it on the surface of the earth where we can breathe it. When you heat air, it expands and there's no container, so the molecules just get wider apart. Now, per unit area, they don't have as much weight because there's less of them. They're spread apart. So with less weight, the gravity won't hold it anymore, so it goes up. So the reason air rises when it's heated is because the gravity doesn't hold it now that it's spreading apart and getting less dense. So convection isn't really a transfer of heat, it's a transfer of air. It's a transfer of hot air. So just to make those clear to start out. So we're taught, scientists come up to these theories, right? About all this stuff and all the mathematical units and stuff. And then they have to teach it to elementary and junior high and high school kids, right? So they have to dumb it down a little bit. But often they make mistakes when they dumb it down. They dumb it down in a wrong way. And these are one of them. That radiation is actually heat. That's not true. That conduction only works for solids, not true. And that convection, it's not technically a heat transfer source either. It's an air transfer. And if the air happens to be heated, then it will transfer heat. So, but I believe that people should know things exactly and get away from the kind of the mistakes. Yeah.
Did you say conduction or convection was the main form?
Conduction.
Conduction.
Yeah. In a house, I mean, convection moves heat, even though it's not transferring heat. It's transferring air, and that air holds heat. So it does have an effect on the house. And all three of those work on both windows, going in and out of windows, and going in and out of walls. So that's why we have to know about it. Now, convection, so we have walls and we have heat. Like if you're standing next to a wall, the radiation from your body's hitting that wall. And when radiation needs either a vacuum or very little matter between it, it just goes straight. It's electromagnetic radiation waves. But once it hits a wall, hits solid matter, it can't go anymore. So what it does is it excites the atoms. So if you're standing near a wall, your radiation will hit the wall and start those atoms in the wall moving if you had enough heat. Say, let's make it better. Let's say you have a wood stove. Wood stove's sending out radiation. It's that fuel's causing the metal to radiate. Those molecules hit the wall. That stops the radiation because they need a clear space, and there's a wall now. But they'll hit that wall and they'll start the molecules in the wall moving, so the wall gets warm. And then the wall conducts either through the wooden studs, they'll go through the sheetrock, wooden stud, outside siding, whatever's out there to the outside. Or if there's insulation, it'll hit the wall, conduct through the wall, get into the insulation, and then it's conducting, but those air spaces in the insulation keep it from conducting very well because it goes through air and slows down. So you're not stopping hot air in insulation, just slowing it way down. And that works pretty good because the more you slow it down, the less you have to heat. It saves money and fuel and stuff, but you're never actually ever stopping it. It's a force of nature and it keeps going. So the big leaks in a house are convection, and that is if you have holes in your wall. Then the warm air just goes right out through the holes. And every house has holes, and it loses a lot of heat just through the warm air going out. So you want to make sure those are all really plugged up and tight. So you have no big holes. Then the other thing is conduction, and the hot air hits the wall. So warm always goes to cold. That's a law of nature, just like wet goes to dry. So if the temperature outside is cooler than the temperature inside, which it most often is, like in the evening, then the heat that you're heating on the inside will try to go toward colder areas because it's drawn to cold. So your walls are colder area, so go toward the wall, go toward the windows first, but then it goes to the wall and then it conducts through the wall and goes to the outside, and you lose heat that way. But you slow it down with insulation, and you slow it down with weatherproof windows that maybe have e-coating on them. So there's a lot of ways we can slow it down. That seem pretty adequate. And they've been starting for the last 10 or 15 years to make super walls and super windows. Super walls having really a lot of insulation, a real high R value. So it takes heat a long time to get through those. And then triple pane and super windows they have, especially for cold places like up north, in the northern part of the country.
What kind of materials are the super walls made from?
Walls, oh, a variety. They're usually, well, they've changed because the available insulation materials have changed. So they didn't have spray closed foam insulation, or at least it wasn't easily accessible 20 years ago. But now most people are doing that because it's the highest value of insulation, and it's also an air barrier. So you don't have to worry about leaking. When you spray that in your wall, it stops all the air from going through. So no convection. And then it's got the maximum insulation value, so best conduction. But you can use other things. But see, closed cell foam has about the same R value as that polyisocyanurate. You know, the stuff they use in horticulture, flower shops, you know, that little kind of green foam. Yeah, there it is right there. See that? And it's kind of crumbly. That's the highest material we have for rigid insulation. And it's about the same as blowing in closed cell. You could use that, and people do use that on the outside. You know, they put their wall and then they put that on the outside so it spans all the studs and stops thermal bridging. But it doesn't create air from going around it because you can't seal it very well on the edges. So if you use that, there'll be, you know, where those join, sometimes they'll put tape, you know, special kind of tape that really sticks and has a lot of longevity, and that helps. But it's not as good as spray foam. It's a much tighter thing. Spray foam is more expensive than that. That's expensive in itself. Spray foam is even more.
And how good are they with like soundproof?
Well, that's a good question. They're as good as anything soundproof.
Here, put this under here and find out.
Yeah, hey, pass that around, would you? So people can. Now, if that's got, it usually comes with a foil side which reflects heat. So that's yeah, pass that around too. I've used that a lot. I've always just gone for that building. It's easy to cut. You know, you can cut it with a handsaw. And it's a really practical thing, and because it on the outside it covers thermal bridging. You know, the studs, because it goes across all studs. It's a really good idea. Around here, I would put that on the outside. I would have a 2x6 wall. Jim still holds out with 2x4. I don't agree. I would put a 2x6 wall, do whatever insulation you have, and then I'd put 2 inches of that outside the wall. You know, you put the sheathing on, then I put 2 inches of that outside to cover over all the studs. That's the most practical way to really get a good insulation in the house.
You're
Now-
saying with the panels with that, you would just tape them? Would you be able to get like spray foam in a can and like put it on the seam to make more of a?
No, because the spray foam needs well, if you put a crack in, like you put an 1/8 inch apart, then you could do that. But you have to make sure you did it well, right? You have to, you know, you can't have some joker just doing a half-ass job. Yeah, that's a good idea. You could do that.
Well, I guess you can't do that.
Definitely not.
So we're going to look at a video that compares all the different insulation materials and talks about closed foam and open foam. It's a real short one. Any of you seen the This Old House series? I figure you.
This old house.
This old house, it's on, I don't know what channel it's on. Cable, but they have a bunch, this old house, and then there's a takeoff on that. But those are really good. They really explain things well. It's a great show if you can get it on your TV. And we've got one of their little spots on insulation that's pretty good. They're usually accurate. I've rarely seen them make mistakes and misinformation. That's why I like to see them. When I get YouTubes for the class, I go through them, and like there's one by Rissinger, the guy who's doing the contractor's doing a lot. He has one on blower door. And I think he doesn't understand the math of that at all, but we'll talk about that later. Which is not hard, because the math is the math in ventilation, which determines how much insulation and how much bigger, was considered difficult finally to the average contractor or carpenter. It's not difficult to an engineer, but most of us aren't engineers. That the building codes, like the California building code, no longer gives you the formulas because they just feel nobody can figure them out. So they walk you through it. They go, well, if you have this much square footage and this much, you need a fan this size to ventilate the house. They just tell you that they have a little table that figures the size of the fan. In fact, you don't even need to do the math. They have a table, and you have so many to so many square feet, how many bedrooms, and they tell you the fan size you have to put in to evacuate all that air. So they're getting to the point, but it's still, if you look it up on the internet, I was looking up, doing some research for this, but they have congresses and conventions all the time to go over insulation. It's not a settled subject whatsoever. It's fairly complex, and they're still arguing all kinds of points back and forth. So I'm going to just talk to you all out of order tonight because I feel like it. But we'll go over more in ventilation. But the law is always trying to look out for your health, right? So they're looking out for fire, because fire is not healthy. You burn to death. And they look out for indoor air quality and too much moisture in your house. They have rules about all that. So it's for your own good. So the ventilation, because they know that people bring all kinds of, is that mine? We all have the same default stupid song. Because they know we bring in all kinds of toxins and whatever, carpets, furniture, we leave our paint cans in the garage, and the fumes are paint thinner cans, and all the fumes go up. And there's just a lot of crap in houses. We've known that. So the government establishes a minimal ventilation. You have to have the air changed. All the air in your house has to be changed every 3 hours. So sometimes people get it mixed up and say it's 3 air changes per hour. You can see how that would be easy, but it's really a third. If it's 3 air changes, if it's 1 air change every 3 hours, it's a third of an air change per hour. So it's 0.3 air changes per hour, but some people get it mixed up, and I think Matt may have done that too. But so the government says you have to have that much change in air to be healthy. But that's not a very tight house. You're losing a lot of energy if the house leaks enough to equal that ventilation, that minimum ventilation. So we've realized that we can't have it both ways. We either have a leaky house that's healthy, that we breathe, but we pay a lot of money to heat it up, or we close it up and then we breathe all these bad things. So that's forced the whole industry to have mechanical insulation, ventilation. So you don't just leave it for your house to be leaky and the air change, have the air changes, but now you have to physically expel enough. So you can, you can tighten up a house with air barriers and insulation and everything and make it too tight to be healthy to breathe, much less air change than 0.3 per hour. But then you can take a ventilation devices and pump out that air to the tightness you want the house. So you make the house overly tight, and then you just let these machines pump the air in and out to what you need. And that means you don't lose the heat, and you're still getting a safe flow of air. Yeah.
Have you noticed a big difference in your electricity bill since you went all electric?
Yeah, my wife says they're lower.
What? Oh, well, you have solar.
Yeah, it's, I don't know.
How?
Well, we have gas too, though.
Oh,
And, I mean, we don't use electrical for heat. We use gas for heat. We have a fireplace, you know, and we just turn that on when it's really cold and then for an hour and then turn it off.
yeah.
So I don't even think we use a lot of gas, but we thought that with the electric stove, it would really jump up and it hasn't. So,
Those electrical heaters are
pardon?
the electrical heaters
Yeah,
instead of gas.
yeah.
And my parents have one, and I think their bill, when they use it, it's like hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, so the going recommendation and everything's changing now that we're going more electrical. We have to rethink. The going thought up until the requirement for electricity, which has only been the last few years, was that those electrical space heaters, if you only use them for 20 minutes, you know, in your office space, or 15 minutes and then turn them off because it's sort of the ambient air is sort of warm, but that's still cheaper than doing gas for the whole house.
This is a whole house electric.
Oh, so that's different, yeah. So there's actually the little spot heaters that you just plug in, you know, those are actually pretty good because it's like a toaster. A toaster and a hair dryer, oh, tremendous amount of electricity they use, you know, because anytime you convert electricity to heat, it's just resistance. What you're doing is you're just putting something in front of that current to stop it. And the current's trying really hard to go, so it just heats up the whatever it is. It's a totally inefficient way to do things. But you only use a toaster for 20 seconds every morning, and you only use your hair dryer for a minute. So it's negligible in the total run of things. So that's why we get away with that kind of, you know, negligent machine. But then that might change too as we start squeezing the energy and trying to get it really down. We're just starting. They may say, you know, they may have a campaign to do away with hair dryers or toasters.
Would they do something?
Things are going to change, yeah.
Would they do something like they did at UCSB, how they had the hot water go through the pipes to heat up the rooms and the radiators? And those baseboard heaters, didn't he say there were those hot water fills?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. He said, yeah, they're all around the room, but in New England, they're all around the room anyway. Nobody seems to care. Like, I didn't know why that was a negative thing. But have you had hot water baseboard in New England?
Yeah, I have in my house.
Yeah. And it may not be every wall. Sometimes it'll go a wall and skip a sidewall, but sometimes it's a lot of the wall. I've had them in my house in New England. They work great. They're perfect. In a house, you've got less to heat,
yeah,
and they work better. He's talking about big labs and things, so it's a little different issue. But what's the specific question about?
Is it cheaper than electrical just to have those water?
Yeah, and that's why New England does it, because it's a lot colder there, and they figured out they've come and they use what do you call them, boilers. They started using boilers in the old days before HVAC, you know, gas furnace HVAC came. So they got used to boilers. So in England, you have a boiler. So anything you need hot water for, you just take it off the boiler. And they go, oh, hey, we can heat our rooms with this. We just run a bunch of copper pipes. So it kind of has to do with the culture and the evolution of the culture. But from my understanding is they're pretty reasonable, you know. But they work, I think they work best in homes where the square footage is limited. And, you know,
Yeah.
I think they're really good because they're radiative. They radiate out from the things. So it's more like fireplace heat. It's a really nice heat.
Do you know what these units are for this classroom and the lab? Are they gas or electric or
I think it's gas.
gas? And it's just the one vent.
Yeah.
Is the knob a timer underneath and then that's
Yeah.
the other side of it?
Yeah. Yeah. What you hear is the air purifier. I turn that on once in a while if we have a cold winter. I don't know if we had the pandemic, so we haven't been here.
And it's just a heater or does it air?
No, it's an air conditioner too. It's probably not very efficient. These things are ancient.
Yeah.
When we got them, they'd already been through a lifetime as a school, so God knows when they were built. But because we don't use them very much, no one's worried about changing them out.
Yeah.
And we keep having the hope of redoing this campus every 10 years. There's a big, oh yeah, we got some money, let's redo Wake Center, and then something happens and it never takes place. So,
The money goes to the main campus.
what's that?
All the money goes to the main.
Yeah,
campus.
yeah, actually. And which is part of the bias this campus has toward, well, we're the only CTE, we're the only, what do you call it? Not career technical, but technical.
Occupational.
Yeah, we're the only occupational training here. I mean, there's a Green Gardener, but that's a non-credit. And everything else is, you know, computers and kind of, you know, GED. It's kind of an odd non-credit and kind of an odd combination. So, but, you know, they're just not, they've got their head in the sand. They don't realize how important the trades are going to be, you know. I mean, well, what's interesting is Biden passed this infrastructure bill, right? That was the one he got passed because there was not much controversy on that. Everybody had bridges that were falling down. So it's pretty unanimous. Yeah, let's pass that one. It wasn't a socialist, you know, it wasn't any kind of new thing, which is not new in the rest of the world, but new here. It was just doing the infrastructure, which was always done. So everybody said, yeah, get that thing passed. But they passed the bill and they told the categories, but now they have to go to the places and find out what they want to do, what specifics they want to do with that money they get, which people don't realize it's an ongoing process. So, you know, Biden will go to a town and they'll negotiate, you know, they'll say, well, you know, we have these needs, and the committee will figure out, okay, we'll do this, this, and this, you know. So, but so that's getting applied. It'll be applied for the next 10 years. It's not going to be instant. And all these trade training is going to contribute to that. And it's going to be part of that. And they'll probably beef up things like this and all the various trade things we have at school and computer stuff, because a lot of it's, you know, pertains to computers too. But they haven't yet. They just, you know, that it's a bias. They won't admit it. But if you look at the charge for the community college, it's, well, originally it was vocational training. That was the original charge. Then somebody came, some administrator, and they made it 3: vocational training, transfer, you know, to a higher institution, like, you know, we send kids to UCSB, and then what was the third one? Crap, I can't remember. But so we've always been either all or 1/3 of the thing, and I don't think we've gotten 1/3 of the attention at the school. And as far as the demographics, you know, we've got a really multi-layered town. We have a lot of working class people in this town, a lot, not just the Hispanic population, which everybody thinks, yeah, but the Hispanic population is both working class and professional class, and the white population is working class too. I mean, it's pretty mixed. But we have a lot of working class people here, and they need an education too. We probably have half working class and half professional, or whatever they call jobs that are white collar maybe. And so I've always thought, you know, to be fair, we should get, you know, equal treatment. But so don't listen to me. If you really want to know, you have to research it. But my feeling is that we get slighted slightly, you know. But I fought to keep this place. We got all the applications, we've read them. I can't talk about them for the new position. Some of them are good. And we meet next week for the committee to go over them, and then we have interviews with the ones we feel. So it's happening. Yes.
You can retire.
I can retire. I'm excited. So I'll have to spend my summer bringing this person up to date. But I'm excited about that. So yeah, we've kept this going. In fact, when they were redesigning, we had an expensive architect company that redesigns institutions. And they were okay. You know, I disagree with some of the stuff, but you know, they all have a pattern. They get a hold of everybody, and they have a huge amount of meetings of groups and groups and groups and refined groups and groups. It goes on forever about what you want in the school, because they have to consult the faculty and administration. And the idea was to make this whole thing the career technical, bring the drafting here, marine diving, horticulture, which Mike thought was a great idea.
Nobody else wanted to leave.
Yeah, I know. Nobody wanted to leave. But so they were going to make this the whole, you know, CTE, which I thought was great, because, you know, they can really, you know, like we contribute to the garden and you contribute to us. Well, We have to go to another campus to do that now, but if you were next door, we could make horticulture stuff, they could make us stuff. You know, there'd be this integration and support, I think would be great. It may happen, you know, not probably in anybody's here career here, but it could happen, you know, you never know. These things go on. This is the third that I know of iteration of the construction. There was one when it was up on the Riviera, and they met somewhere else for the construction, in some single place somewhere. And then there was one here, I think. No, it couldn't have been here, because these buildings were here. I don't know where it was. There's one in between somewhere, one of the campuses. And then I think I started the one here on this campus. That's this one. So this is the third. So they come and go, you know, and now they're not going to go because it's pretty obvious how important this kind of work is. So, but I had to fight all along, and there's so much paranoia. You know, anytime you get a bunch of people together and they're vying for resources, there's just so much bullshit that goes on. And I've had deans tell me, oh, you know, the vice president's looking to cut your program. Tell me, you know, the chair over the years. So I really panic, and so I go talk to the vice president. You know, I just go wherever I have to go and write them things, you know, saying how important we are. And I've spent a lot of energy over the years. And I don't even know if I have to, because it's hard to tell what, you know, what was true and what was not, but I didn't want to take a chance. So anyway, but you guys that are getting trained here, for ever how much you are, and if you go into construction as a field, keep your eye on this place as a possible place to work in the future, you know, because you know, you may not want to do construction, like you'll get out of being a laborer if you stay in the field. You'll become a journeyman, and you may like that, but that may get old, and maybe you don't want to go into a company, into the administrative, you know, the office part of your career. I never liked that. I had a couple of companies, and I hated the business part. Some people love the business part. Don Gordon of Gordon Fiano Framing, he would never shut up about how great business was. I'd have to go listen to him all the time, you know. So some people really like that, and that's perfect. And they go into that and they make a lot of money as a contractor, and that's good. But a lot of people are I like the aesthetic part of building. I like to design things and create. So it's creative. So I don't want to do business, because that to me is not as, or it doesn't satisfy that kind of creative part. There's a creative part to business too. So you guys will find out, if you don't know already, where your interests and, you know, are. And so you got to be aware that there's a lot of ways to take just basic construction, a lot of directions to go. So it's good. It's a good thing to start, because there are a lot of things. And as we start needing construction more, I mean, someone was telling me something, a job they had, and it was because they knew how to make things. It was a tech job in tech industry. And a lot of times it's electronic stuff that you need to make, but sometimes it's actual, you know, building things, more housing and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities. So I encourage everyone to keep coming in this. So what do we got here? So we got leaks. Let's go to heat leaks. Air leaks through holes in the building. Convection cooling in wall cavities. So if there's nothing to slow the air down, it's just going to head to the outside. It'll detect that coldness and it'll just head out there. So when we have windows and they, let's say walls rather, and they have insulation in them, if there's any passageway from anywhere in the wall, bottom to middle to the top, like the insulation is not put in, it's got a gap in it, the air just goes from warm to cold. It doesn't know anything else to do. So it'll find that, and it's usually where the plate is cooler, because it's wood. There's not insulation. So if there's these gaps, and we're going to study that in a little bit, a few minutes, the air will go on the wall and it'll just beeline right to that, and it'll bypass all the insulation. So you could negate the whole bay of insulation by a convection channel. So it's really important, and they've realized that. So now we're really, and the code, the code enforcement officers actually come out now and look at your insulation. They didn't used to do that, because what's there to look at? You just staple it up. Now that we know all this stuff, they come out now and they will rate it. And they will make, if it doesn't rate in the highest category, they'll make you tear it out and do it again. They'll tell you what's wrong. So it's becoming a more important practice.
How can we fix that problem if there's a gap?
Oh, I'll show you. And Saturday, that's what we're going to talk about and work with. And if you don't make it, we'll have it on film too. And then conduction through thermal bridges. So in a wall, between the insulation are studs, right? And so the hot air just conducts through the interior surface into the studs, out to the outside surface. Wood doesn't block, doesn't have the R value that insulation does. So that's why they started coming up with this idea of putting rigid foam on the outside to go over those studs. So we go through the studs and through the wall, and then it would hit that insulation on the outside and slow down there. It's a great idea. It's a really good solution to that. Then we have a bunch of practices. Now that we've figured out where the problems are, we've designed all these practices. One is a blower door test, which we're going to do. I'll show you a film tonight, and then we're going to do that door in this room on Saturday, just to show you what's involved. We got to see these things against the wall, these black bags that are down at the bottom. That's all the blower. Well, the ones on the cooler back are the blower door bags. It's really cool. And that's another area you can go into, you know, building performance, which we have a class in. A lot of you have taken that already, but we'll just mention a little bit of it in this class. But it's another offshoot of building that people are going into. Again, it depends on your personality and what you like to do. If you like computer stuff, I mean, you know, everybody's different. Some people have a bunch of stuff they do good, and they're weird things. Like they may like computer stuff and engineering type stuff, but they don't want to be an engineer. So maybe building performance is a great combination of building and that kind of engineering type, you know, testing. So, so we'll do a blower door test, and we'll talk about exhaust fans, and there's a test for doing the duct work, which is a leaky place we found. Smoke test. When we do the blower door test, a lot of times we're testing for the total leakage, because we just seal up a place, then we run a fan, and whatever makes that fan balance, that's how much air is coming in. The fan evens out the pressure, so it'll tell you by how hard it has to work how much leakage there is. But that's a whole house. So you can rate your house. If you do it on an existing house, and we're going to look at the thing I'll explain in a second. You can rate it as leaky, middle of the road, or very tight. Now we want tighter houses. But then you can also pinpoint with smoke tests where the leaks are. So if you have a blower door test, the code requires you to do a negative pressure, which means you blow the air out of the room. And so it depressurizes the place. And then smoke goes. So you depressurize the room, so smoke comes in. Air from the outside comes in. So if you hold a smoke stick against the window, it'll blow it this way. That's not quite as accurate as if you pressurize the room, and then the smoke will go out where the holes are. It's easier to find them that way, because if it's coming this way, it's harder to tell exactly where they're coming. So a lot of times, you know, people do, and I suggest this to people, is to do a negative test first, a depressurization to get the ventilation data, and then do the positive test to find out the pinpoint where leaks are. There's a whole bunch of tests. There's when we look at the blower door, it has a manometer. It's a little computer, and it tests pressure. It's a pretty simple computer, but it's perfect for this. And a lot of times you can go into a house and do pressurize it, and then go to room by room with this little thing and find out when the pressure drops are. And you can, if you have a big drop in a room, you know there's some leak there. And it's really amazing. Sometimes you'll go, it's a bedroom, and you go, where could it be leaking? You go to the windows, they'll be fine. You go to the closet, and there'll be a big hole in the closet floor that used to be a pipe or some God knows what, and it goes straight down to the foundation, to the crawl space. So, you know, this giant hole is just sucking down hot air, and But that's how you find it. It's really great. It goes, takes you right there. So, so we use the depressurization to find out where those are. And then also we can use infrared scans. So the blower door test makes the difference between outside and inside more. And so that's better for the camera. So you can find, I mean, you can test it anyway, but with a blower door, it highlights the scans, and you can find thermal bridges and all kinds of, you can see the studs because they're a lot colder than the insulation. The insulation will be orange and the studs will be blue. And you can see all kinds of leaks. Sometimes you'll see an area and there won't be any orange at all, which means someone forgot to put any insulation, which happens all the time. It's weird, but that kind of stuff happens. People forget to, you know, they're in a hurry and they forget a closet to do it, you know, and that's it. So, and then a pressure test for ductwork, because ductwork is put together by duct tape. And we used to think that was sufficient. And duct tape has a lifespan of like 5 years. And then it falls, and then it degrades. And if it's holding two duct things together, they either fall apart or break all together, which means all your hot air is going into your attic. So we have this machine, it's this one right here. And we're not going to test this because it's just kind of not the best. It's not like a house. But you can find out how much your ducts are leaking, and then you can put a smoke in that and then blow smoke into the attic, and where the duct separations are, the smoke will go out, and you can identify it immediately. A lot of times they're an easy fix because you can just go in the attic and take a better tape. They have improved tape now, and you can fasten it with ties and mastic it or whatever the particular joint needs to have, and then tape it. Done. I mean, how easy is that? And those are huge leak problems. So the machines we've had, the application of science to buildings really made it easy, just in time too, because we really had to do this. It could have been planned better. So I saw this film, this documentary last night on it's on the History Channel, I think. And it was about TV dinners, the history of TV dinners. That was great. Now, you guys didn't live in that era, but I lived in that era. When I was a freshman in college, I ate a lot of TV dinners. I used to take the metal things and clean them and stack them. I had a pagoda in my living room table. But so Swanson was the guy who did it. But the other guy was Stouffer's. You ever heard of Stouffer's frozen dinners? And he tried to get in. He wanted to make more gourmet dinners than Swanson, but he couldn't get it together. And then the government decided they had huge microwaves that they were using for industry, and they decided to make a household version. And so they did that. And the guy came to Stauffer and said, "Look, we're going to make a household version. We thought you'd want to get in on this and design your food for the microwave." And he said, "Sure." So, but that's how fast these things go. You know, microwave was just something like computers or something at Los Alamos. They were like giant rooms full of these huge things. And then someone said, hey, you know, if we could miniaturize that and put it in every home, we would make a lot of money, and you know, the world would progress. So this testing equipment for leakage has been a really boon to the building industry. The history of it's really interesting. I never go through it thoroughly. I'd say a few things once in a while, but the biggest thing was the EPA. What's the thing on that the refrigerators have, and you know, the sustainable tag? What's that called?
Energy Star.
Energy Star. Thanks. That's an EPA, Environmental Protection Agency's program. And so they started doing this with houses. Now we think of it as mostly appliances, but it's actually still goes for houses too. But the first input was houses, and they started building. They take a development and say, okay, we're going to do a, you know, Energy Star savings. So they really load up the insulation in these places, and then they would test them. They didn't have the blower door yet, but they would test how much money, you know, this house paid for electricity, for resources compared to a house built in a standard way, and they were the same or worse. And they went, what the hell? We just spent all these millions of dollars beefing up these houses and not performing. So that was one of the, and they did this, a lot of different organizations came to this. And so then they said, okay, we're doing something wrong. That's when they learned that the installation was being put in wrong, live. So, and they would just go in and they would tear these, they would take a house and they tear it down. They say, what's wrong here? They learn a hell of a lot doing that. And then when blower doors came along, then they could test those and really narrow in on it. So it's pretty interesting how it came about. And then once you figure out what's wrong by these various practices, then you've got to go and mitigate all the problems. So you plug holes in the envelope and the ducts, you insulate or re-insulate properly, you eliminate thermal bridges. And then a lot of times if you do it on a remodel, because contractors are as evil as every other kind of person, and they'll cheat you sometimes. What you do is you do a blower door test before they start the work, and it tells you how your house is performing. Then when they get done with your work, you require them to do a blower test. And if it's not really working a lot better, if something's wrong, then you can get some satisfaction. So now we use them, and there's these things like if you took the building performance class, we talked about HERS raters, and there's all these rating companies that do those tests before and after, they'll come out during the project and document everything. Because a lot of the alternative methods of heating and cooling and insulating and this and that, the inspectors don't know enough about, city inspectors. So they'll just assign that documentation to a private company like HERS raters, and they'll go out and document and establish whether, because now the code says you can do, not what are they called? Prescriptive, which means prescribed, which means you need an R18 wall. They just make sure you have R18 in the wall and that's it, you're done. But you can also do a performance standard as an alternative and show how it's performing in the same way or equivalent. And then you can do something that's not typical and get away with it. So now they have both approaches to it in the code. But now now they actually go through the HERS rating process standard because so many people are doing that alternative way of inspecting. We'll talk about all that later. So then weatherization practices, and these are like new houses, you can do advanced framing, which will help the insulation and insulate better. We'll talk about proper ways to insulate. And we're going to talk about where holes are. That's going to be the second thing tonight, and what kind of materials, resources we have to plug in. And that's real practical for everybody. I mean, it's just good to know for yourself in your own home. And I've got some old stuff. I used to have to go to, when I started greening this program, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, I had to go take a lot of workshops because I didn't know anything about it either. And so I'd go out in the Central Valley and the boonies, and some guy would be talking about, and he'd pass out this list. So a lot of it's old, but mostly it's valid, and there's just been some improvement in products, which the ones I know about I can talk about. But we're going to go to Home Depot at some point, and I'll show you what a lot of these products are and how you can decide from one to the other. Okay, any questions about any of that? So I'm not going to go through a lot of this. It's just for your reference. But this first R value table has other than wood and insulation, I believe. Yeah, it's got drywall, sheathing, siding. It's kind of interesting to have those R values. Most lists just have insulation because that's what you're choosing. But it's kind of interesting to see what the siding and the structure, what the different values of those things are. So it starts out with a little bit of everything. Probably has concrete in there somewhere. Maybe not.
Does it say that Rockwell and cellulose are about the same? Is that what it's showing on?
Where's this? Yeah, but the rock wool that, the video, I might show it tonight. Some of you have seen it. That Riesling, the contractor, Riesling, is that his name?
Reisinger.
Reisinger. He says Reisinger or Riesinger? he mispronounces it. It's German, and I think it's REI, and he says Riesinger.
Just call him.
He says Riesinger, but it should be Riesinger.
That's a fine line.
Yeah, so he has a whole video on rock wool, the bat rock wool, not the loose rock wool, and he really touts it, and I think he's right. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good insight. It's a really good sound barrier. I need a sound barrier between a couple rooms, and I put that in. Really works well. So, you know, yeah, you know, a lot of people use fiberglass in walls, interior walls for soundproofing, but it's not as good. This rock wool's denser. I mean, it's pretty dense. It'll stand up by itself, and it's a better ear thing. And we're starting to get more hip to creating less loud areas. That's coming back into fashion again. I don't know why it comes and goes, but it does.
Have you ever worked with rock wool before?
Yeah,
Does it make you itchy?
not as much as fiberglass. Does a little
But
bit.
it still makes you itchy though, right?
Yeah. I think it's spun like fiberglass.
What
And-
about cellulose? Have you worked with cellulose?
Oh, cellulose is better because it's like newspaper.
It doesn't make you itchy.
Yeah. Yeah. Vermiculite, we don't allow anymore because it is mined where asbestos is, and we're never clear if there's asbestos in the vermiculite deposit. So that's pretty much out. But so here's autoclave. Oh, that's a different kind of. Yeah, so that's some things. Oh, here's some lump. Oh, here's some brick. Here's concrete. This is great. So you have a 12-inch block, concrete block. Now they don't say whether that's filled or not. And that makes a big difference. So, but anyway, it's only 1.26, right? And that's a 12-inch thick wall. If you put 12 inches of bad insulation in a wall, you're going to get a hell of a lot more than 1.26. So you can see the relative, you know. Well, here's poured concrete. What must be per inch? Yeah. 0.08. So concrete is dense, and you think, oh, that's got to, you know, prevent a lot of.
What are those values?
What are those values?
Like,
Okay, yeah, good question. So it's the R value per inch. We got my cursor on it. And this is R value. If it's got a standard thickness, then it'll just have it for the whole thickness, like fiberglass bats. Well, they do per inch. Let's see what has the thickness. Oh, total wall assembly. Okay. So do you know what R value is? So we talked about U value, right? We talked about windows in the window unit. So R stands for resistance. So it's just an engineering value that documents relative. It's all a relative thing, right? You want to put in something that's a lot more resistant than something else. So you don't need to know much about it, just the relative value. So insulation, that's what we really need, because there's a code that says you have to have a certain minimal amount of R value. I think it's R18 now on the wall. So if you have fiberglass bat, which will show you what those all look like in a minute, that's 3 to 4. Say, we'll give it the benefit of the doubt. They're improving those, so maybe they are 4 now per inch. So if you have a 2x4, that's 3.5 inches times 4. That's 12. Which is 3.5 times 4. That's 14 for R14. You need R18, so you're short. So you either have to put what they used to do, what Jim does, is he'll use that. He likes 2x4, but then he has to put foam, rigid foam on the outside, and that value will have to add up to. That to be another R4, which it is. I think an inch of that isocyanurate. Anybody spot that right off? There we go. Yeah, it's 6 per inch. So 1 inch of that would bring your wall up to code. If you had a 2x4 wall and a regular, 4-inch bat. So it comes from No, we said last week, the U factor, they don't always call it value, but the U factor of glass is how transmissive, how easy it is for light to go through, right? Or heat, I guess, it'd be heat. And so the reverse of that is how resistant it is. So windows aren't very resistant, you know, more heat goes through it than stopped by it because they're just a little piece of glass. So, but they're related though. So they first established the engineering value for windows, the U value. And then when they flip it over, they say, well, our value is just 1 over that. So that's where they get the absolute quantity. But you don't need the quantity. You don't even need to know what it means. You just have to know the relative. You have to know what the code requires, the minimum. Then you have to make sure the wall has that in some way. So it's all a comparing things from that point. Yeah.
If you have a client that really wants brick and is really attached to it, is there any way to do like
Yeah.
brick and then insulation?
Oh yeah, no,
and
brick facing is real common. You do a regular wall, wooden wall,
Yeah.
and then you put the brick on as a finish. Yeah, that's the only way you can do it.
Could you do like brick and then have brick inside too and have it
Yeah.
in between? That would work.
Yeah. One of these blower door, I don't think we're gonna look at it tonight, but we look at it in the other class, was a building in Baltimore, it was an old building, like 1800s, and it was just brick. They, you know, they went, God, how do we insulate that? You know? So what they did is they didn't want to, the client didn't want to change the outside or inside. So they just sealed it up. They used that thing that sprays, remember we saw, let me show that again too. And they just covered every single crack that let air out. So they maximized they minimized the holes. So no air could get out, but they couldn't do anything about the conduction. And they said it worked okay. You know, it wasn't great, but you know, they'd have to heat the house more than they would otherwise, but they wanted the brick. So I thought that was interesting, approaching it that way, sealing it so well. Yeah, and you might live in a historic zone too and have to do all that. Some places allow you to do a facsimile that looks close enough, but it's more modern and function. And some places don't. You can't change the thing. We could have a whole discussion on that, but we won't. So cedar logs and lumber. So log house, people always ask me, is log house very insulated? Well, it's 1.33 per inch. And say the logs are 8 inches. So that's 1 1/3 times 8 is what? 8. 1/3 of 8 is 3. 11, 10 or 11, or 10 or 11. It's not bad, you know. You have to really make sure those are sealed, right? I think they chink them. It's probably not very good. I don't know. I think now if you buy log cabin kits, they're a lot more engineered for leaking. Everybody likes that look though. You know? The Abe Lincoln look. So this is, if you wanted to know the difference between the different styrofoams, because a lot of them out on the market, there's the white bubbly stuff, and then there's the blue. These are all listed here. So that's kind of interesting. But you know, people don't use those anymore. The extruded and the polystyrene don't have enough R value. You know, people use isocyanurate pretty much exclusively, or they blow in the closed cell. And then the next, then there's a whole bunch of pages with bats. Okay, so vocabulary. I don't know what we know, even from this class. It's all big. It's all a haze to me. But so you got bats. I've been saying fiberglass bats. That's length, standard width, either for a 16-inch on center stud wall or a 24-inch. So they make they call it a 16-inch width. It's 15 1/4 or something. And then they make a 24, and then the length is 8 feet. So bats cut at the typical ceiling height, 8 feet. So you can just put them right in a stud bay, not do anything else. Staple them in, and that's it. But if you have a higher ceiling, like say 10 feet, an 8-foot won't make it. So you could get 8-foot bats and then cut one into 2 foot and put it up above it. That's acceptable. Or you can get a roll of the fiberglass that's not cut into 8 foot, just one long roll, 30 feet long, and then cut it to 10 foot or 9 foot 8 or whatever your length is. So you have rolls of fiberglass and you have bats. So that's the difference there. And then you have loose fill, which is stuff that you spray in, or you can hand do it, but now they spray it in because they can get more, they can pack it down. So in an attic, you don't need gravity, it's just pointed down, so you don't have to have it stand up on a wall. So you can just put loose fill stuff. You can use cellulose, which is newspaper shreds, or you can use fiberglass, which is, you can use regular fiberglass rolls, or you can have fiberglass that's in loose form, or rock wool. If your attics have this dark gray crumbly stuff, that's rock wool. A lot of Santa Barbara houses have those.
If you're doing bats, do you have to tape the joints? If you have to put 2 pieces together?
No, and we'll talk about that tonight maybe, but Saturday for sure, because we're gonna put some in and show you the ins and outs of that. It's a good question. See, most of the bats, it's really hard to make an air barrier because you staple them and the stapling creates little holes. And there's a little gap. Even if they touch the top, there's air still gets through. So you're not going to really seal much of the bat. The better job you do, the more seal it will be. But some people go in and spray with a closed cell just the first half an inch, especially on the corners. That's all they do. And then they put bats against it. That's become a practice. You got to watch. Well, it wouldn't matter if there was a convection loop on the backside because it's already taken its time getting through. So they've tried combinations of spray and loose fill and bats over the years. I look at magazines all the time and they have now we're doing this. And most of the time, a lot of the time they have convection loops. They don't fit close enough in those gaps, which is not good. And they don't talk about it. And sometimes they figure out how to do it where the gaps are behind and they're not as dangerous. So this just has Louis,
yeah,
on the disadvantage column here tells about like for instance fiberglass bats, skin irritant, formaldehyde based resin may leave voids. That's not in you, that's voids in the wall.
Which way do they put the paper again?
On the inside of the house.
So the fiberglass is facing out.
Yes, because you're going to use that paper to staple it on the inside of the studs. We used to fold it and put it in a half an inch and let that paper bend. This is the outside. Put it in, let the paper come toward the inside, and staple on the inside. And the sheetrockers like that because they could see where the studs are when they sheetrock. But it creates a 3/4 inch convection channel, the whole width of you couldn't do anything worse. The whole width of the thing and the whole height. So the air goes in, it sees the cold up there, it goes by and it's all gone. It bypasses the whole wall.
And then is that the same for the ceiling too?
Yeah.
If you're up in the attic.
Yeah, but in the ceiling, it'd be a pain in the ass to try to hold it and staple it from below.
No, yeah, I'm talking about just on top of.
Yeah, so you can pour stuff because if it's got the sheetrock, you just pour it there. And so they do that, or you can put bats, just roll bats on it. They do both.
With the insulation side.
Well, yeah, it's usually not it can't be an air barrier because it's on the top. So the air's already gotten through the wall. So they usually don't try to staple it down. When they
Right,
lay
yeah,
bats on the
you're
ceiling, they just lay it in.
Yeah.
And there's, better and worse ways to do ceilings. A lot of people put it up to the top of the studs and then they put another layer if they want more. They put the other layer going across so it covers some of those.
Well, they crisscross it.
They crisscross it because it goes over the bats. And you can't walk on that. So people who like to walk and store stuff, you have to think of something else, but people will do that. There's a lot of creative stuff for attics. Cotton's not that great. Like blue jean. For one thing, they use it for bats and they don't put a backing on it, paper. And I recommend using backing because the staples hold it in place. And over the years, there's a controversy about this. some people say they don't fall with gravity over the years. I don't believe it. I've torn enough houses and I've seen them fall. So if you don't staple it, that's always a possibility. And the jean's the same thing.
You know what people use that for now? Is for doing vans. They insulate their vans. that they
Oh,
live out
oh,
of
really?
With denim. Yeah.
Well, the problem with cotton, here it'll say absorbs moisture. That's a big thing. If it gets
Right.
wet, it's just, of course, almost all these things will completely get wet.
So on your ceilings, you want the insulation to be stuck to the plywood, not touching on the sheetrock,
No, you just put it down onto the sheetrock.
onto the sheetrock.
Yeah, yeah, that's the easiest thing. And then a lot of people will put it on there and then they'll put plywood. They'll have the thing just go the size of the joist.
Uh-huh.
And then they'll put plywood over the whole thing for storage. And
Yeah.
that's a pretty good, I mean, they're upping the minimum value of attics like they are walls all the time.
Yeah.
And so they're having to be creative because you can't afford to keep making the joist wider because the wider wood costs a lot of money,
Right.
especially now. And so you have to add wood or they're coming out with different schemes on how to build it up. So there's a lot of variables, like whether you want storage or
Right.
walkway or, you know. And they're also encouraging, we used to put a lot of thought into the attic because that was the top of the thermal envelope of the house. Then the attic was not conditioned, was not heated or cooled because the insulation stopped at the attic floor. And then they realized that we put all our HVAC equipment in there. And when it's really cold, it doesn't, they didn't think it affected the performance for some reason for so long. I don't know why, but then they figured out, oh yeah, this stuff's really underperforming. The cold really puts a chill on it. So then they said, well, okay, now the best practice is to condition the attic. So now they're not even putting much, if any, insulation. In fact, they don't because they want the warm air to get into the attic.
Right.
So they don't put any insulation in the joist, and then they put all in the rafters
Mhm.
now. And with rafters, you can put it, that's where it's exploded in terms of possibilities, because they have rigid insulation on the top. Now, there's a lot of different treatments of roofs. And you can put fiberglass in it, you can just staple fiberglass, that's probably the simplest. But there's combination treatments. You could do fiberglass in it, staple it, and then run rigid underneath it so that it didn't, it was a thermal bridge there.
Yeah.
Usually they put rigid on top to put it. I think we may see it. I think we saw a movie, again, Rissinger, I think he did one where he put rigid on top. That's kind of the wisdom now is to leave your attic warm. Now that presents a problem because then how do you, well, the problem's ironed out because you want to ventilate the attic. But one of the reasons you ventilate the attic is because you have a furnace up there and it's probably leaking and you want that nasty furnace stuff to go out into the atmosphere and cause global warming. But more than that, the roof got hot. We used to use dark colored asphalt shingles, not even composition, asphalt originally. It would get so hot, it would almost scorch the underside of the top of the rafters and the sheathing, and then occasionally start fires. So they decide if you ventilate that whole area, it'll cool it off. So if you close it up because you're making it part of the thermal envelope and you're conditioning it, then you've got to make sure that your heat's cool enough. So along with that, they have insulation on top of the roof below the shingle so the heat won't go down in. Or they're having white roofs, light colored roofs now, which reflects heat and won't get hot. So they just, every time they make a change, an improvement, they have to change something else. Yeah.
For your guys' tiny house here and the little story house back here, why are you guys running all the wires not in conduit through the walls?
Well, I have nothing to do with that building. I go in there once in a while to make sure there aren't any ghosts or hobos, but where are the wires? They're on the outside?
Oh, they're like where the studs are, but they're not in conduit.
Because it's Romex.
Well, it's Romex. They've got a plastic coating, right? So that's legal in a wall. Yeah.
You can't pierce it. Like if
You can.
Yeah, if you're like hanging a picture and.
Yes, so what you have to do is if you have wires near the, in nail distance.
Yeah.
You need those little metal plates that go on it. And then the sheet rocker or the housewife who's putting up the picture doesn't do that, but people short that all the time by nailing the Romex, so.
What's the cost difference? Like, wouldn't it just?
Oh,
better
it'd
if
be
you just-
tremendous with conduit, it'd be a lot more, yeah, it wouldn't be worth it.
You
And
have to
it's-
go with metal conduit too, because plastic conduit can still
Right,
go through
What
with.
what happens if you
nail or
want to
screw.
pull wire after the fact, like if you want to add stuff, you can't do that with Romex, right?
no, you gotta, like,
You
like,
gotta open up the
like,
wall.
remember my kitchen? It was all 120 because we had a gas range, which just has a 120, you know, for the switches. And so I needed 240 for the electric range. So you can't do it with the wires that are there. That's the first thing I asked. Is there any way you can, you know, fool around with the wires that are in? He said, are you kidding? He said, we got to run a wire from the box. So this guy was really good. He made one hole in my hallway ceiling and he was able to get wire.
He dropped it down.
Well, I went across, we have like soffits for the HVAC, but you have to get into them and sometimes they're blocked when you change the room. He's able to do it from one hole all the way to the, in the garage, he ran it through conduit against the wall. But from there to the range, I was really happy because I didn't want to plug. I thought he had to make a hole every 2 feet to plug. I was going, no. But they're pretty skilled. I mean, if they're good.
Called job security too.
What?
It's called job security. Why make it easier for the next guy?
Yeah, well, yeah. So, yeah, you just, well, you know what they're doing? You know, it's all an economic thing, right? And if something can be done cheaper and more people will buy houses because that's the way they'll do it. And then something negative will happen and they'll go, oh, we really shouldn't be doing it that way. Let's upgrade a little bit. That's how it all changes. So Dylan's right. It's cheaper to do. There's a lot of cheap ways to do things and they're not always the best way. So what they're thinking about doing now is running conduits and all the service stuff outside the wall. And they're making better. I mean, they used to have soffits that did it, but they're trying different ways where you can access it a lot simpler. I saw YouTube the other day where they put all the walls were plywood, decorative, you know, really nice plywood that they could stain, and the screws showed they were like nice screws. You know, they look like commercial screws. So you could take all the wallboard off and redo any kind of electrical or plumbing. And it looked really good. You know, it looked like a paneled house. So I don't like that look, but they could have painted it white and it would look more like sheetrock. But I think that may be the way we go, because even though sheetrock's beautiful and it mimics plaster and it's the way we've lived for 2,000 years, it's really inconvenient and costly. And we may just go toward more modularizing homes and getting used to it. You can get used to anything, you know.
Get more broken hands though. People punching the plywood instead of punching the drywall.
That's true.
Might get some stronger kids out of it though.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there was anybody know? Nobody here works for him. I forget who works for who. What's the down on Milpas toward the ocean? What's that company? Major company in town. Anybody know that? Anybody know construction companies?
Memphis towards the ocean, where is it? exactly on
What?
Memphis? Where is it on Memphis?
Down toward the batting ring, you know, where it turns to go in the freeway. There's a taco stand right there.
East Beach Tacos?
Huh?
East Beach Tacos?
Yeah. And it's right there, huh?
Oh, it's not like granite, is it?
Gifford,
Gifford? Yeah, there's Gifford and Crane.
Gifford and Crane, that's it. Thank you. I knew we'd find it. You guys are smart. I knew we'd find it. Their building, they did a remodel and they just put birch ply and screwed it in with nice looking screws for the whole ceiling and walls. They did that. So it works commercially because you don't expect it to be, you know, as what we consider homey or whatever. But I see it in a lot of places. I think it's great, you know. We just, if enough people do it, then it becomes hip and then it becomes the fad and it becomes the normal way we do it. So Good question. Okay, so you guys look at this stuff as much as you're interested. Again, I'll tell you what's gonna be on the test in terms of this. We don't have to memorize. You can shut the door if it's cold. Memorize all the, you guys getting cold? Oh, okay. I know.
But the wind doesn't.
Well, you know, I wonder if that, this thing's probably cold. It's a purifier. Do you need it? Yeah. Yeah. Can shut it off for now? These, I think, are cross.
Jordan wants to stay close.
Okay, so look through this. You know, Lewis had a question about the effect of the stuff on your skin. You know, so that's good to, you know, you
I
can
work with rock wool, like planting stuff, so.
Yeah, oh,
I
yeah,
get
okay.
into you whenever I use it.
So, I mean, this is good stuff to know for anything. If you're going up in your own attic at home, your wife says, or your girlfriend or your mother or whoever says, you know, go up and do something, and you know it's rock wool and you know it's gonna stick, and you just dress differently when you go up. So that's good stuff to know. Okay, this has, see, these are old, but they still cover the most stuff. The loose fills, mineral wool such as rock wool or slag wool. The great thing about rock wool is it's an industrial byproduct, so it's something that's thrown away from some industrial operation. So that's one of the things. Vermiculite, perlite aren't used very much anymore. Cellulose and wood fibers, of course. You know, the most exciting stuff in terms of insulation is coming from tropical Central and South America, I think, because they have a lot of plant, you know, tropics has a huge amount of plant life. And so they're making things, organic things that are really good. I think it's great. So we get stuff, we get a lot of information from down there, stuff they're doing. Ridge insulation, fiberglass, cellulose, plastics, you know, polyisocyanurate, that's a mouthful, but that's the good stuff. Oh, here we go. So this is, wait, let me get the right one. I had trouble copying this. This is grade 1 insulation. Can you see that? See, it has just an occasional gap. It's pretty well tight. They say tight 6 sides. We'll do this when we do it this weekend. Front, back, side, top, and bottom. That's what you're shooting for. So they grade this. The inspector will grade this. And there's grade 2. There's a tear. There's bigger gap. There's gaps. You know, you can see how that's obviously not as good. Sometimes, you know, bays aren't always uniform. Sometimes you'll be at the end or the beginning, the bay will be smaller. So it's got to be cut. So there's a human problem right there. If you don't cut it right, there may be a little gap the whole length of a thing. That's not that noticeable, but there. And then the worst one is this grade 3, which they probably wouldn't pass. They probably say, oh, come on, do it over. But it's, you know, not touching in so many places. That just negates. They went in with blower doors in these EPA houses, you know, these, and they saw stuff like this. And oh my God. Spent all that money on insulation and then people don't do that. This is, you know, the attic stair. The stairways that pull down are hard to insulate because they're made in such a weird way. There's things you can do, but attic access is a lot easier. There's a lot of stuff you can do. We didn't talk about my attic access when we were at my house, did we? God, I can't believe it. That's the main reason I drink it there. I was showing you my invention. It's never going to make me any money whatsoever.
But yeah, what'd you do to solve that problem?
Well, you know, a double hung window.
Yeah.
When they're closed and you turn the thing and it kind of cramps down on it. Well, I thought that's what I want. Something mechanical that puts pressure in. It took me a long time to figure out because this is at right angles. So you have to, it's a different direction for everything. So I had to think about it for a while. It took me like a week to figure this out. But I got it. I'll take a picture of it and show you, bring it to class. Cool. And you know, when it goes down, I just turn the thing and it pulls it down onto the weather strip. And I was telling you, you know, I did that, and it was I'm not sure if I had to alter the actual thing. Maybe I didn't.
You fabricated it?
No, I just bought a double hung thing, and I don't think I had to change it much at all. But I had to put a block in. You have to make sure all the angles are right. But someone should be, if we're getting down to really tightening houses like we say we are, we pretend we are, that's one of the components that's got to be done, because the hot air goes up and it goes right in those places.
There's that one thing like I found last semester, was it called an attic tent or something like that, that he sent you? You remember?
Yeah,
Was it, what was the guy's name? Was it Emmett or something?
yeah, but it was something over the whole thing, right?
Yeah, it might have been, yeah.
Yeah. You can insulate and do that, I mean, just on the door, if you just have a door, you can put rigid. That's a good thing for rigid, because obviously floppy fiberglass won't work, but it's that air seal that's really important. So this has some stuff about attic capsules. I don't know how, just about cooling foam. It's not, it doesn't talk about the, oh, what did I do?
Patrick, if we're doing fiberglass work on Saturday, should we plan on wearing long sleeves?
No, I don't think, unless you're really worried about it. And if you're really worried about it, you can watch, you don't have to actually do anything,
Yeah,
right?
are we gonna be touching it?
I am, and anybody who wants to. I'll show ways to cut it. I mean, some of you know all this, but some of you won't. Way the easy ways to cut it and how it has to go in and those kind of things. So I'll be demonstrating, but then I'll ask anybody. What?
Oh,
I'm just calling dibs on being the cameraman on Saturday.
Oh, damn, I lost that thing. Where is it? Okay. So this second part's on Google Fasters, on air sealing, fundamentals. This just tells why it's good. So you should read that. Several reasons. Saves you energy. Also more comfortable. Drafts. You heard that word drafts. That's what drafts are. Leaks in your shell. And in New England, it's really bad because the housing stock's really old, and there's a lot of drafts. They'll have a fire in one side of the room, and everybody will have the furniture and everything right up against the fire because there's leaks all over. They believe in leaks, at least in Maine. The old guys would say, "Oh, the house has got to breathe." You don't want to just. And they knew there were toxins even back in the old days. But and it does have to breathe, but we have to control breathing is what we do now to ventilate. And also we can recoup heat as it goes out. I mean, the air that we're ventilating, it'll be warm and we'll flush it out. We'll talk about that. Heat exchangers where the air coming in to replace it runs through a what do you call it? Heat exchanger, and takes most of the warmth of the air going out. So those aren't practical in a place like Santa Barbara. They're very practical in the northern part of the country. People wouldn't build it out. So it's good to know about, even though it's not something we would use a lot. Leaks also are a problem in colder climates because the warm air is trying to go to the outside, right? The outside is really a lot colder. The temperature on the outside will start to go into the wall, right? And the point where the point where water condenses is called a dew point. Like dew is water in the air that's condensed onto a plant or something. So the dew point starts being in the wall. So if you let your warm, moist air get into that wall, it's going to hit a dew point in the middle of the wall where it hits the cold from the outside, and it's going to condense. And that water is going to turn to water. That water vapor that was in your hot air will turn to water and make your wall wet. It'll destroy your insulation and probably rot your sills. So it's really important to deal with that. But back there, they talk a lot about dew point and all those things. We don't need to do that here because it never gets that cold, Air barrier materials. And don't worry about that. We'll look at that in another context. Backer rod. So we talked about that in the other class, I think. And I've got samples here that I'll bring Saturday. There's this little foam wound up rod. They're different sizes from a 1/4 inch to an inch. And you put them in areas that you're gonna caulk, because you don't want to put a 1/2 inch wide, 3/4 inch deep caulk. That would take 20 bottles for the window, which is expensive, and it will dry and separate and it won't work. The caulk's only made to be effective with smaller areas. And it's pretty good if you have like an 8 by an 8. Well, it's pretty good for that. And now they will last 10 or 15 years. So you put this backer rod in that fills up most of the space, and then you caulk to that. We got a picture of it. So, but those are pretty important. Home Depot has those. Then it tells the difference between the different kinds of caulk, the water-based, the silicone. Nobody likes silicone or polyurethane because they're really messy. They get all over everything. They get all over your hands, clothes. But they're better than the water in terms of efficiency. So it depends on what you need it for. We'll look at the spray foams. They've came out with one spray foam originally, and it was pretty expansive. So they didn't know better, and they would indiscriminately fill the cracks next to their windows, and it would expand so much it would push the side of the window in, and they couldn't open the windows. So it took us a while to figure out, oh yeah. So now they have a special one for windows and doors, and it doesn't expand so much. And they have them for everything. You need them if you're against a fireplace or something that gets hot. You need a different kind of caulking or foam, because the heat will destroy a lot of it. So they make a high temperature foam and a high temperature caulking. So we'll look at all that. They've really got it subdivided now, finally. Mastic is really important for duct joints. There's a special kind of compound that you put in that seals, and then you put a mechanical something to hold that together, and then you duct tape over that. There's a preferred way of doing that that'll last for a long time. This talks about the places of air leak soffits. Used to be in kitchens. We don't do this anymore. It's kind of interesting. Maybe other places back east, Midwest may still do it. But they would have cabinets go only so high as you could reach. And then they would have a space between there and the ceiling. And you could leave the space open, but then it would get dust. Some people put baskets and stuff up there decoratively. But a lot of people don't like it because it's dust. So they started building the wall, a little wall above it that was painted the same as the room. And that's called a soffit. But sometimes they would build that and put the cabinets in before they would insulate, depending on when the sequence of jobs was. And if it was done and they have the cabinets, there's no way to get at it, and then the wall behind it doesn't get insulated. So that's in old houses. That's what I'm talking about here. Well, this is part of it, but this right here. See, this is that piece of wall above the cabinet. And if you forget to insulate it, then you got a huge leak. So some of these areas that are problem areas, are not quite. Another one was split level houses. Remember these split houses where you walk in and you could go down one way and up another, half a floor? Those had real problems with lining up the insulation and the air barriers. But we don't build those anymore too much, right? The style's gone out of fashion. So that's what that one's about. But it still gets built. And then talk about how to deal with chimneys. Pocket door cavities. Cantilever floors. That's what cantilevers are. Jim loves cantilevers. You guys ever had them? And there's some stuff about ceiling ducts. That's pretty good. Here's a backer rod here. We put it in, and then I've got another picture of it. I've got a picture of a lot of typical leaks and what kinds of materials you can use to plug them. Better than this here. This one here. This shell sealing standards for sealing the shell. You can buy this kind of stuff. It's kind of these mesh screens. So they take stucco really easy, and or not stucco, but plaster or those you can buy it. I've got some samples I'll show you this weekend. Plumbing holes through the wall. Now, in New England, they don't put plumbing on the outside walls because it freezes and the pipes burst. So most of your plumbing's on interior walls. Out here, we don't do that because it's warm enough. But so if out here, the plumbing goes into an outside wall, and the plumbers are really sloppy, which many of them are, that's the difference between a good and a bad plumber. They'll make they have those escutcheons, those little plates, and they'll make a big hole so they don't have to wrestle with it, and then they'll just put a plate to cover it. Well, air just goes around that plate. They're not sealed to the wall and not that giant hole. So there's all kinds of ways to fix that, and you discover that. It's important. They have plates, like here's a sink trap and it's going outside the wall, and you can't get a thing with a hole in it into it because it's blocking, so you get two halves that go together. Sometimes they'll have one with a hole in it, and they'll cut just a cut in it, and then you can torque it around. All kinds of different things. So this is kind of useful, even though it's kind of old school. These are typical places where you have a lot of leakage around your electrical box. I think enlightened plumbers today, because we're all kind of energy conscious, are probably trying harder to do this stuff. And they work for contractors. A lot of plumbers are sort of attached to certain contractors, and those contractors are conscientious, so make their subs do better. So I think it's improving, but in old houses, if you're trying to, it's been done a long time ago where they weren't conscious, then you really have to look for these things. And dampers are another thing. A damper, what a damper is, it lets gas out or air, and then it closes up so that air doesn't come in, or water or whatever. And they have to be pretty loose, so they don't get stuck, right? So they make them looser than they need to. So it's always good to buy expensive ones of those that are engineered better, because you'll have a tighter fit. They're starting to do things with those to make them better. Here, anybody have a furnace in a closet? Where was I today? I was at my dentist's office. I was at my dentist, and I went into the bathroom and they had a furnace in the closet there. I went, bingo! Yeah, so those holes on the top, you can see hot air from the furnace just going right out there. So you've got to be able to do that, and here's some ideas on it. So here's the one where you can take one with a circle in it, cut that, and torque it around the pipe. So different ones of those. Caulking with vent pipes with penetrations through your attic, you've got to look at those. If you've got a leaky house now, your own house, or when you're living in, you might want to take this handout, and if you have access to the attic stuff, and look for places that might be making your house colder. This one is a chimney, so there's a special kind of caulk. A lot of times you can only put metal, so if it's a big hole, you put metal up to it, because you can't put sheetrock with paper on it because the heat will start that on fire. So chimneys take their special kind of thinking. A lot of times the way joists are put on walls, there's gaps in it. And of course, if they're in the middle of the floor, you're not going to find it, but if they're attic, you will see it above. And you can definitely fix those up. Here's another old type of framing, balloon framing we used to have. And they would do the floors like this. Instead of hanging these, well, actually, the way we do it now is we put a foundation, a plate, and then we put the joist all the way to the end, and then we put the walls on top of the joist. And that way is a lot easier to insulate. But the old ways they used to do it, balloon framing, they would just put the joists, and the studs, and these would sometimes be multi-story studs, and then they hang all the floors onto the studs. And it's really leaky that way. It's really hard to insulate. So platform framing has its own problems. The only place you can get to are the basement and the attic, but there's a lot of stuff you can fix up there. Bathtub, huge. There's a lot of plumbing around a bathtub, and sometimes they just cut a giant hole in the floor below it, and all that cold air is just coming up into your house. So, there's ways that we can fix that and not have it happen in the first place.
Don't they sell spray foam that doesn't expand as much to
Yeah.
fill small holes like this?
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's what this tries to tell you, is that the size determines what kind of material you use. But those are still pretty small. You can't use the, you've got to have some structure for the foam, right? If you're filling up a whole bay, it's got, three sides to clean against. But if you just got a hole, there's nothing, So, yeah, so you've got to sort of figure out what will work and what won't. This has more stuff. It's pretty comprehensive. Here's a backer bead, shows you a little better. There's a space you're trying to caulk. And if you had to fill this whole thing with caulk, it would cost you, $50 a shot. But if you put this backer board in, then you only have this much to caulk. Right? So that's a really useful thing. It's a great thing to do there, leftover plastic. They do have these. Have you ever seen these gaskets, these white foam gaskets or rubber? Those are really excellent. And they used to give them away when it first came out. They stopped doing that. And I don't even know if you can buy them. I should go check Home Depot. But they have them for every type of, 4-ply, any kind of switch or thing. And they really stop air because air really goes out. In fact, if I do the blower test in here, which I may do, if we go to the faucets, you do a blower door and then you do a smoke thing. And the outlets, the smoke just goes way out quick.
You'll see the foam with the outside outlet covers you can get.
Yes.
You'll see it with those ones, but I don't see them much with the inside.
I know, it's crazy. And there's a lot of leakage that goes through those. And they were giving them away when they first came out. It was a big, they said, oh, great. They were just like giving them away. And, it's like everything. Once the fad's gone, it's, so here shows you where it is. And, there's a lot of leakage around the edge of these outlets, these fixtures here. And this foam just helps them real tight so the air doesn't go out there. It goes into that box and then it's into the wall, bypasses a lot of stuff.
A way to insulate the box better.
No, I don't think, but there, we'll show you Saturday, but boxes only go part way into the wall, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people just cram insulation behind it because they just want to get it in. But when they cram it behind it, it compresses maybe even half a wall. And that compression it doesn't have the insulation value, but close to it. And so you lose a lot of that. So there's ways to insulate around the boxes that are better and worse. So I can tell you that much. Oh, where are we? I'm gonna keep losing. Don't answer that. What kind of name's Kindred? That's our president's name. That's a really old name, kind of name, isn't it?
Let's edit that out of the recording.
Anybody know her, met her?
See that.
I think she walks through our garden on campus.
Yeah, they usually walk around main campus and never come out of here. I invited the last president, Goswami, out here because I was worried about the program. So I had him come here and he sat right there where Alec is and I sat across from him and I said, I'm worried that this program's gonna go through, and I was telling him all this stuff. And then he gets fired the next year. All that work and worry. I tell you. But he had built some houses himself. He'd been a semi-contractor himself. So I thought, oh great, I can really bond with this guy. But he would talk to me and never say yes or no, or that's a great idea, or I'll get on it. He would just shake his head. So you're going, does this guy get it? Is he gonna help me? What's going on here?
Probably got fired.
That's probably why he got fired. Yeah. So they used to do this.
They're on their phones, not even paying attention.
So they used to have this formula. So there's a there's an engineering body, group that establishes all these engineering standards for HVAC and things. It's called ASHRAE. It's got an acronym. I have no idea what it stands for. The E probably stands for engineering. But they developed these standards. And so they said, okay, if a house, if every 3 hours you get one air change of all the air, that's suitable for health conditions. So if you divide that by 3, you get 1 hour. Divide that by 3, you get a third of an hour. So a third of an hour, or 0.3 ACH air changes per hour, is the legal minimum air change. That's not a very tight house. That's with all the normal leaks that come in a house. They have to be at least that. Before they had a blower door, it's interesting, huh? They couldn't make a limit because there's no way to measure. You could stand in the house and freeze and go, this house is really leaky, but they couldn't quantify it, and they couldn't make any kind of legal case. So it wasn't until we had blower doors that actually these standards made any sense. So we have this standard, but that's a great standard for health, but it's still very leaky, because if we build houses crappy and they naturally leak this or worse. So our energy is going out all those leaks. So I told you before, we got to decide, well, we need a balance between saving energy and making the house breathable health-wise. So what we do is we tighten them up just as best we can, however, and there's many different ways. Santa Barbara, the most we probably do is put drywall on, and then we caulk certain strategic areas where air gets behind the drywall. Like, drywall doesn't always go down to the floor. And if there's a gap, then the air will go under that and into the wall, right? And that's an air leak. So you caulk along that bottom plate and the top plate and corners, there's strategic places, which we have on some handout you'll get. That's about most we do here, and that's plenty to do here. They even have a paint that is air resistant, and you can paint your whole interior, and that'll keep air from going through. So that's about all we need to do here, because it's, the climate's benign. But you get some place where it's cold, and you have to keep the air from getting into your walls and the moisture condensing and losing all that energy. It costs money, and you have to keep doing it. So we want a much more tight house than this. So the way we get around and satisfy both of those is to make the house really tight, so it's then against the law in terms of minimum ventilation. So then we bring in air just enough to make it legal, to satisfy his point there. And we bring it in strategic places so it's not drafty. And we can also heat it as it comes in so we don't lose heat. So we can regulate that where we want it. So there aren't drafts, and we're saving money, and we're ventilated. So that's what we do now. And if you have a house, if you're retrofitting a house, or you want to bring it up to, they don't have codes that are retroactive that go back, because people can't afford it. They live in the houses they have. So there's all kinds of new building regulations. But if you want to go back and make your house tighter just because you're tired of spending money on the energy, then you've got to test your house to see where it is, and then you've got to plug it the ways we've been showing, and then test it again and see if it's improved. So to do that test was hard for people. So, but a test tells you what your house is actually doing, but then you need standards that tell you whether that's tight or loose or really tight, right? So they can rate air changes per hour or CFMs. Machines, the ASHRAE has an hour rate, but all the machines we have minute rates, cubic feet per minute. It's just the way the machines are made. So we have to convert back and forth between ACH and CFM. And I won't hold you guys to that. In my building performance, where it's more technical, we talk more about that. I just want to mention it so you know that there's some complexity to it. But if you guys go into this at some point, you'll relearn all this stuff anyway, so it's not really critical. Yeah.
Is there a standard size of ducting that people use in their house, like 6-inch or anything like that, or is it kind of all over the place?
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
I think there's the building code has minimums, like you can't have less than a certain size
Okay.
or maybe bigger, but I think there's a variety of, because they still allow flex of a couple of different sizes. And they still allow, sheet metal rectangular cross-section ducts. So, HVAC's probably my weakest point. You got any HVAC people in here? No? What's his name? Jordan.
Yeah.
He knows HVAC pretty well. It's such an engineering thing, So look at, there's ways to do, so we have to find the standards. And since houses are all different sizes, there's gonna be, you have to figure the standard based on your house. So obviously it's gonna involve floor area. So what the code did is instead of putting a formula and say, figure this out, they tell you now, they sort of baby you and walk you through it. It's kind of a new approach to the code. And I think it's great because the code should do this for a lot of things, because people aren't of the same intelligence. Some people are smarter and some aren't. But also the code is so poorly written that even if you're intelligent, it sometimes doesn't make sense and you can't use it. So by making it behavioral, like if you do this, that'll be right. It's a lot better, I think. So I like the new way they're doing it. So this says a simple solution for meeting Title 24 ventilation requirements. And I don't know, I think the government puts this out, but it gives you a sample house, 1,500 square feet with 2 bedrooms, and then it just tells you, it walks you through how to do it. So the way you determine the airflow needed for the house is you're going to figure out CFMs that you're needed, and then you're going to do a blower door test and see how they compare. It'll tell you how much CFM leakage is, and this will tell you what you need for minimum ventilation. So floor area of the dwelling, and this 900 is this place because we do the blower door here. So it's a 30 by 30 room, 10 feet high. So you do this, and then you divide by 100, and then you add this number. So we don't have bedrooms, so it's kind of weird here. But if you had bedrooms in your house, you take the number of bedrooms, add 1, multiply by 7.5. How they figure this out, God knows, but that gives you a number. So I pretended we had 1 bedroom in this classroom, and so then I added 1 to that. So that's 2 bedrooms times 2 is 15. So I added, this came out to be 9, and I had, so 24 was what we came up with. This sample they're doing is a house, 1,500 square feet. And they came out with 37.5 on their example. And then what you have to do, that means you have to ventilate in this house they're saying, or this room. You have to ventilate at least to that much because that's the minimum change of air you need. So all they do is they go right to the fans, choose whole building ventilation or an exhaust system that meets that thing. So let's take the exhaust system because that's the easiest. You can use your bathroom fan or your over your stove, your range hood fan. Those are the 2 most common because they exhaust out. And you can, what you do, one way of ventilating your house is to exhaust all the air out, and then your house will be depressurized and it will suck air from the outside through all the leaks in your house and bring in new air. But that's okay, it's still circulating air. That wouldn't be good if we lived in a cold climate because you'd be bringing in cold air through all the leaks. You have to heat that, but for here, it works fine. So you need a fan that's 40, the next biggest, the next amount. So you need a 40 CFM fan in one of those places. Now the only catch, so that's easy. You remodel, you just go get a new fan in your bathroom or your, but they have to be quiet because you're going to have these. If you're going to use this for a whole house fan, it means it's going to be going 24/7. And if it's noisy, like a lot of how many people have ever used your range hood fan yourself? And not just the women are cooking in the house. If you use it yourself, how loud is it?
Super loud.
It's loud. How about your bathroom fan? Anybody here got a quiet bathroom fan?
They're pretty loud.
They're pretty loud too, the older ones. So they're looking out for your psychological health. They're going, people will go nuts and start getting Uzis and blasting their neighbors away if they have to live with a fan like our typical fan all day long. So they put a requirement on 1 zone or less. That's a measurement of sound. Typically fans are 5-6 zones. So it's required, and guess what? Costs a lot more money to have a quiet fan. we're still talking about a fan. So we're talking about the difference between $100 for a cheap fan and 300 or 400 for an expensive fan. But $400 to meet minimum ventilation is not that bad a deal, right? That's all you have to do is put that fan in your home free. You could do it yourself. Fans are really easy.
It's kind of like, well, that's what you think until you hear the vibration.
Well, yeah. So yeah, so you can get these fans. They are more expensive, the ones that are quieter. And in my kitchen, because we're remodeling our kitchen, so we had a chance to get we were gonna get a new range hood. And the company that made the cabinets had it, but it was really not very good pressure. You know, you don't want a fan that's not gonna suck up much. If you're redoing your kitchen, you want to get a good fan. So we really researched it. We worked with a guy at Ferguson's and really went through all the stuff and what was available. And we found, and they also have to fit the cabinet, and a lot of them don't. It's the weirdest thing. You'd think all this would be worked out. It's not at all. You got to actually go down and do all the work. So we found one that was the right size, and it's pretty quiet. We're satisfied with it. But to make it quieter, you know what they do it in a range hood fan? They put the fan at the end of the duct that goes outside. So the fan's at that end, and you can't hear it because it's in the building, it's in the wall somewhere 20 feet away. It's pretty smart, actually. But then you got to be able to get at all that. You got to go, find where it's going out and put the fan on that end. And that was, I said, I don't want to do all that. So we didn't do that. But that's how they quiet like a kitchen fan. And they could do that for the bathroom, but the bathroom fans they've gotten are really, they've been making it quiet for a long time. So you can get a quiet one at the right CFMs pretty easily. That's now, if you use that for a whole house fan, you've got to make sure the bathroom door is open so it sucks air from the whole house. There's things you have to do. Again, Santa Barbara, we open the windows a lot. We live inside and outside pretty back and forth. We don't need to do, we're pretty good the way we are. But the code has done this because in colder climates, if they're an old person and they can't close windows easily or they forget, they don't want them to freeze to death or not have enough ventilation. So they make these requirements and they make you get a fan that does it automatically. So, there's wisdom in this code. For some people, it's necessary to have it done for you. But for all of us who are physically able and still have our senses, opening and closing windows still works pretty good. So, yeah, so I looked into whole house fans for my house, but the best whole house fans are ones that are designed when the house is designed and they're in the stairwell or some really good place and it's all engineered before you build. And they have great fans and they're not that expensive. So if you're building a house, they're easy to put in and then you forget about it. They're quiet and they just do the air. If you're retrofitting, there's just a lot of stuff to consider, where the noise is, how open your house is with all the air gets to the fan. And again, because we live in Santa Barbara, I didn't want to put that much money or tear apart stuff to do that. So we're happy with our fan. I'm not going to use it for a whole house fan. I don't think we need it because our windows are open most of the time. So anyway, in a nutshell, we don't need to go too much further into this unless you're really interested in how they get this stuff. It has a way to convert I'll have another handout I'll bring Saturday. That has a lot of those conversion things if you're interested in that. How are we doing? Can I get you to look at a 7-minute videos maybe? And we'll round it out. Yeah. So before I forget, Saturday, we're gonna come here. Yeah, 1:15. What am I looking for? Oh,
Maybe the chairs have on
make sure when you
Are we at main campus for Wednesday after center?
I'm not sure. I think
So some of you have seen this, so I'll maybe skirt through it. I'm obsessed with big wave surfing. I don't do it myself, obviously. I don't think anybody over 40 does it, but, you know, that place in Portugal, Nazaré, they discovered, it's mind blowing. And they do a lot of videos of these guys practically dying. I mean, it's crazy stuff, but the waves are so beautiful. They're so freaking big. So you'll see, in all my stuff, you'll see wave things. That's why I look at it.
A couple of my friends are in Portugal right now for that.
Really?
Yeah.
They surf?
Yeah.
Are they big wave surf?
I've been in contact with them for a
I mean,
while.
it must be the rush of a lifetime. Look, they said they were going like 50 to 60 miles an hour
Oh my
on the
God.
boards.
Yeah. It's like hitting concrete when you.
Yeah, and when you hit, oh God, I know. And they still go back, you know, like I said, oh yeah, it's just like hitting concrete. I broke my back.
Yeah.
It took him a year to get over all that. He's back. I would never do that. I would never get anywhere close to a big wave, but it's really beautiful to watch. So it's pretty spectacular.
You know, 4 foot wave, right?
Oh, where they go?
70 years. You gotta click the skip ad button. there.
No, I know, but I'm trying to find where the sound is. Where's the sound on this thing?
It's probably on the.
Underneath the computer.
Yeah, looks like
Yeah.
an issue on.
It's underneath the computer, Patrick.
What?
You're connected to the speakers.
I think you should turn it down on
Yeah.
Insulation level, because that's the heat flow. Now that
Been a
order of
while
all
since-
4 of those, super important. You're never gonna get a call at 2 AM from a client saying that your house is leaking air, but you're sure gonna get a call if your house is leaking water. But right behind waterproofing is air sealing. And it's super important to me as a builder, because as a remodeler, I've seen tons of houses that had a bunch of condensation in the back of the sheetrock, which led to moisture and mold and all kinds of bad things. And remember, when that air leaks in, it's going to bring pollen and all kinds of other nasties. And if air can leak in, typically those bugs can get in as well. So air sealing is super important.
Yeah.
All right, so here's what we're doing here today, guys. We brought the air barrier guys in all the way from Ohio to do the very first Texas house with their system. Now, this is a revolutionary system. I think it's incredible. Let me walk you through it start to finish. Now, first, we started with a pretty tight house over here. We actually did a pre-blower door test on this house, and we tested this at 1 ACH 50. But we wanted to be much tighter than that if we could. And here's where their system comes in. So what they do is they set up these nozzles around the house on a tripod stand. And you're going to see these multicolored cords kind of running throughout the house. Now, these nozzles are going to spray an acrylic product, basically a kind of like an what's the word I'm looking for? Like an aerosol caulking into the air, a very, very fine caulking that's misted throughout the whole house. And then at the same time, they're going to pressurize the house with the blower door running in reverse, meaning that we're going to push air into the house. And then all those little cracks and crevices on those small places that might leak air, that mist that's in the air of this, basically the acrylic caulk
Forced out.
that's floating, is going to start accumulating. Now, I ran a really cool test. I've got a door over here set up where I've got an air conditioner coming through. So I've got a piece of plywood in there for temporary job site conditioning. And I cut 3 holes in that door. I ran a small hole, a 3/8 inch hole. I put a kerf cut on a saw, and then I ran a big 2-inch hole saw over there, and I put a screen door material over top of that. And as the test runs, as this aerosol accumulates, check out what's happening over here. The hole, the 3/8 inch hole, was totally glommed up. Basically a big, almost like a snot ball of this product, totally sealed that hole off. In fact, they tell me they can seal up to a 1/2 inch hole. The kerf cut, again, almost looked like I put a direct bead of caulking on that kerf cut. But I found this super interesting. This is that screen material. And look how it accumulated on the screen here. You can see the back of the screen right here, where you can still see the screen. And that white material from air barrier just totally clogged up all those holes. And on the front side, it looks like just a white circle, almost as if it had been caulked over. My understanding is this actually happened pretty quick. And that's basically what's happening throughout the entire house. Now, this is a pretty tight house to begin with, but of course, there's all kinds of tiny and minute cracks everywhere. And that's what leads to that loss or that gain. And remember, when that air leaks in, it's bringing with us all kinds of things that we don't want. So if we can't make a proper envelope for our houses, we can't truly condition and serve our homeowners with healthy air on the inside. Now, of course, people are gonna comment, this house is too tight. Don't forget, guys, this is brand new construction. I've got a fresh air system. It's gonna run through my ventilating dehumidifier so I can drop the humidity out. It's gonna run through a giant media filter so I can take out all the pollens and all the nasty stuff. And then I can bring in air on my terms when I want that air, not just when the air is blowing. And it's not going to be filtered through my stud bays where I might also get some particulate matter or some fiberglass or whatever it is in those stud bays. So this is an incredible process.
So when they want to do a good air barrier, not the kind of brief one we do in Santa Barbara, but up north, northern United States or Canada, they want to do one, they'll put plastic, visqueen, 10 mil plastic, and they'll just make it a surface for the whole inside. So where sheets come together, they'll caulk it and staple it and tape it, and they'll just get everywhere. It's very labor intensive, but you need to do that to stop the warm air from getting into the wall and condensing and rotting the wall. So that's the most intensive to do it. This replaces all that. Think of the difference in labor. They just turn this machine on, leave it for whatever it is, 6 hours or whatever. And it goes to all that, they pressurize the house so that the air is trying to leave the house to balance the pressure. If you pressurize the house, the air will try to get out. And it goes out all the holes that are in the house, and this stuff goes with it. And it fills up all the holes you can't even see. You don't have to see, it'll automatically do it. So the whole freaking house gets vapor barrier. What a revolutionary idea that is. I mean, I agree with him totally. It's probably expensive now because they're just starting, but pretty soon it's going to be what everybody does. You just, it's not here, but where it's cold, you just don't have to do any vapor. You get done with all your framing, make sure it's as good as you can do it, and then you put this machine in and finish it off. You're done. I think it's really great. Anyway, one more. These are buddies from
Drinking water before bed burns 46 pounds in 2 weeks. If you are struggling to lose weight and you're over 25, then you need to hear this.
If you have an open stud bay, then you can use any one of these installations.
Okay, so let's talk about insulation in general. We all know that its primary metric is the R value. It talks about how it either slows or stops the transfer of heat.
Right.
We either want to keep the heat in the house during the winter, or we want to keep the heat outside of the house during the summer.
Right, because heat always wants to go to cold.
Okay, so R values.
All right, this is cellulose right here. This is about 3.6 per inch.
So R value of 3.6 per inch.
Right, and this is blown into the wall cavity. This is called a wet blow or sticky blow, where they blow it through a gun, and there's a mist of water that actually mists the insulation, sticks it together, and dents back into the wall.
All right, and it's really just chopped up newspaper. right?
Chopped up newspaper is treated with a boron, and that's a fire retardant and also an insecticide.
Gotcha. Okay, and this guy right here in the middle,
All right, this is a closed cell insulation,
really hard.
very rigid. Now, the R factor of this is 6 per inch.
Wow. So that's
same
pretty
as
hot.
polyisocyanuric.
Gotcha. All right, and this guy right here.
This is an open cell, again, 3.6, 3.8.
It drops a lot to
All
open
about the
cell.
same. All of the other insulations that we're
It's
going
not
to
as
look at
nasty. but
are about the same,
less
except for this one.
And we blow this in, it very quickly expands, and now we've just shaved it off and filled this entire
Right,
site.
goes in as a liquid, 6 seconds, it expands, you shave off the excess.
Gotcha. Okay, and what are we looking at right here?
All right, this is a ground up blue jeans. It's made into a bat, and you just put it into the wall, the
Pressure
same
fit.
as you would put in
That's it.
fiberglass insulation.
Gotcha. All right, and everyone knows fiberglass. This is very common all across the country.
Right. Now, fiberglass insulation goes into the stud bay. It should be put into the stud bay loosely, not packed in tight.
Because this is all about trapping air. And so actually compacting it in there means that we're trapping less air. So you want to actually leave it sort of fluffy.
Now, because air moves in this wall cavity, sometimes you want to put on a air barrier on the outside, and that will stabilize the efficiency of the insulation. Actually, will stop the air from moving inside the wall
So
cavity.
Tyvek,
So the R
let
factor is stable and cold.
the house breathes, but it'll stop
So
air
let's
from
also talk about the
rushing in.
movement of air, because
quickly.
air can contain vapor. And so we have to think about which way the vapor is going and how we either stop that or slow it down.
Right, that warm air, think of it as filled with moisture.
Right.
It's trying to get to that cold side back here on the sheet.
Warm
I
goes.
love this
up,
guy's
okay.
accent.
So a vapor barrier right here. This is the polyethylene. You staple it to the wall, and that stops the moisture.
See, that's what they do. They put that barrier.
Mhm. Now, you've always told us that you want to see the vapor barrier on the warm side of the wall. So down in Florida, put it on the outside, up in Alaska, keep it on the inside. That doesn't work for us here in New England because we've got both a heating and a cooling system. In the winter, we're making heat in the house and that's gonna wanna go out. In the summer, air conditioning, obviously.
Right, well, what can happen is the vapor in the winter, in summertime, can collect on the backside of your drywall. You can't breathe or dry out if you have a vapor barrier, but this is a vapor retarder.
This is a
And
new,
it basically puts up
relatively new
just like the
product, great
fall.
idea.
But it actually allows the stud bait to breathe, so that in the summertime, the moisture that does collect back on the backside of this retarder can actually dry out because it breathes.
It's not a full barrier. It does want to work in one direction. Slow the vapor transfer on this side, allow it to breathe on this side.
Now, this is a sheet, you can also get it on the insulation itself.
Gotcha. Okay. So some pretty good lessons right there. Obviously, all these are going to need a vapor barrier or a vapor retarder. What about this wall right here?
Well, because of the makeup of the open cell and the cellulose, it's dense and air can't move in it quickly, so it doesn't need a air barrier. But it depends on where you are in the country to establish whether or not you need a vapor retardant or a barrier.
So depending on what climate you live in, you may have to figure out. In terms of the closed cell, do we need a
Closed
vapor?
cell doesn't need a vapor retardant or a vapor barrier.
So this sounds like a really good option. It sort of begs the question, why don't we see it used pretty much everywhere?
Well, I think the biggest drawback to this is cost, all right? This is 4 times the cost of this or even a fiberglass insulation.
I think it's really expensive.
Double the cost of this.
If you
whole
add
thing.
the cost
Okay.
of doing a.
Now,
plastic
everything we've looked at
vapor
right here
barrier,
is in an open stud bay, so we
Changes
know that they can go, if you've got it all the way down to the studs or if it's new construction, what about a retrofit application?
All right, a retrofit, you can take this cellulose right here, not wet blow it, but blow it through the machine through a small hole in the wall, usually 2 holes, one in the center and then one at the top, and blows through the machine and actually dense packs it into the wall cavity.
Okay.
Now, the fiberglass insulation over here, you can actually have a product that instead of it being in bats, it comes in individual pieces like this, and it goes through the same type of machine, sucks it in through a bigger hole, like a 2 or 3 inch hole,
Yeah.
and dense packs that into the wall cavity also. Again, a double blow is important, halfway up and about a foot down from the top.
So also good for retrofit. What about the blue jean? Can we blow this in and
No,
retrofit?
no, that's a bat system. It has to go into an open wall cavity.
Gotcha. And how about our foams? On the open cell, we've seen you actually pour this in through little tiny holes.
This is actually flowable or pourable. It's a faster set time. When you spray it, it's 6 to 8 seconds. When you pour it into the wall cavity, it's 5 to 8 minutes. It goes in as a liquid, sits on the bottom, 5 minutes, and then grows up inside the wall.
And then our closed cell foam, can we retrofit
You
this?
cannot retrofit it. It has to go into an open cavity.
All right, Thomas, this is some very good information, quite a bit of it there, but we got questions coming, so hopefully that'll straighten some people out. Thank
Hope so.
you.
That was pretty good, huh, for a short,
My name is Scott Harrison.
for a short little. Any questions about that? We're gonna look at how you take fiberglass that has backing, paper backing, how we staple that into a stud bay. We'll do that Saturday, and we'll talk in detail about what has to be done. Also, and we'll do this Saturday too. When you have things in the wall, right? Plumbing and electrical and God knows what else. And there's ways to put the fiberglass in. We used to just cram it where the most space was. It was if the Romex was a third toward the front, we put all the fiberglass behind it. That compresses it more than it should be, right? Because it's a smaller space and you have none in front of the wire, so you have a convection loop. So now what we do is we peel that fiberglass, peels really easy into thirds or half, and then you put half in back and a third in front, so you can actually go right around whatever you have on the wall. So we'll do that Saturday. That's one of the things we're going to do. So it's pretty simple what you have to do. You just have to, see it done once and you're all set. Any questions about? There's a lot to know. We can't do it all at once. A lot of you guys are seeing a lot of these things on the job, so that'll kind of put it in place.
Patrick,
Yeah.
I have a question about just going back to I don't know, just insulation. If you're doing a remodel and you don't want to tear down the whole wall,
Yeah.
could you just take the drywall off and maybe add 2 by 2 to all the studs to do more
Yeah.
insulation?
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of work too, but it's not as much as tearing it down. Sure.
Right.
You can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's the the best way, but most people don't want to spend that money to do that.
Right. For like the exterior wall.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's complicated because if you have cabinets and stuff on the inside and you got siding and stuff on the outside.
Yeah.
That's difficult, but then again, if you put the holes on and blow it in, you may get more value out of the cellulose because you can put it in a little denser thing than what was in there before. If anything, some houses don't have anything. Then the blowing would be good because you're going from 0 to.
Right.
But it's still, if they're 2x4 walls, it still wouldn't be enough. If you want to, bring it up to more of today's standards, you're going to have to do something like thicken the walls or put rigid insulation on one of the walls. And again, the siding's in the way on the outside and the sheetrock and cabinets and stuff are in the way on the inside.
Right.
So doing the holes is good. It upgrades it for sure. And it's a lot better than you've got. But if you really are conscientious and you want to bring it up to today's standards, you'll have to do something more extensive. Yeah.
Evan, I just
Now, if
cut the
you,
wall.
if,
You did that?
I cut the whole wall out and then laid it and then put it back over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus cutting the whole.
if you spring for the money to do closed cell foam, then what's 6 times? Yeah. So you wouldn't have to add any extension to the studs. Just take the sheetrock off like Lewis did and then spray that whole thing. And it's 3.5 inches. So that's over R18. So you're legal right there. The code in a new house, you have to go by their standards, period. R18 or whatever it is. And with a retrofit, there's all kinds of balances. If you're remodeling this past a certain percentage of your original square footage, then you have to bring it up to code. If it's under that, you can do whatever the wall will take.
Right.
But the closed cell foam spraying in, I mean, you're not going to have a wall less than 3.5, less than 2x4, and that will bring you up to the code. So without having to add things.
Yeah.
If you consider the labor and the cost of just 2x2s, like say 2x2s are expensive because they're not used a lot, so they cost more.
Mhm.
But if you took 2x4s and ripped them, then you got the labor of ripping them.
Yeah.
So you got labor costs there and then nailing it up. So that's going to be balanced out by the difference in closed cell foam and whatever else you're going to put in to fill that.
Right.
So I don't know if it's 4 times, he said 3 or 4 times as much, the closed cell foam was what he said foam. I don't know if it's still that. This may, I mean, every year it gets cheaper, so this might be a 5-year-old film and it may be not quite that much more. You can easily find that out.
Do you think you need that here though? Like it just seems kind of overkill.
Yeah,
Like you could just get some rolls of the fiberglass stuff.
yeah.
For
For around here, it never gets that cold.
I'm not
Now.
worried about sound. Maybe if you want some sound dampening,
Yeah,
there'd be an argument for that.
but there's places here that don't have any insulation. When I did my BPI training, we went to a house, we selected a house up in the, where was that? Up in the hills above where Mitchell terminates up in the hills. And it was built in the 20s, the house we did, and it didn't even have any wall. It had no studs. It was just layers of plywood. Was the wall. There's layers of plywood. So you couldn't put any insulation in there. I mean, that was stuck there. So you really have to build that wall out. And we just did a blower door test, so we weren't looking to evaluate the information, but that's, I mean, the insulation, but that's how that was. So you find all kinds of crazy shit,
And my place didn't have any insulation.
Yeah. Yeah, when I grew up, nobody put it in the 1800s. When I grew up, there was no they didn't even have walls. We just had, branches go over and put leaves, big leaves we could find. Yeah, but no, they didn't put any insulation. It's so funny. And then they had these wall heaters, electric wall heaters, just coils electrical. And that heated. And then we had jalousie windows. Like Hawaii, they have those slat windows, which are there's like they're like total leakage. I mean, they're just glass that doesn't even fit tight against one to the
It
other.
doesn't seal at all.
We had those and no insulation and heaters, but electricity was cheap back then, and gas, if you had gas, it was cheap. And so it was just why bother with the insulation?
My neighbor still has those windows on their bathroom.
Yeah, you find them, yeah, you find them in the bathrooms all over.
Yeah.
Hawaii, it's the standard, you know, it's like, oh my God, well, in the old days, now like. Hawaii's doing a lot of great sustainable stuff, so they have more solar than anybody. They're pretty savvy, they're doing a lot of stuff.
They have a lot of wind too, I think.
They do, they
In
do,
Maui, I think.
yeah. Who was I asking about wind power? Was that a dream?
Wasn't it Jordan over at UC?
Oh, yeah, Jordan, thanks.
Yeah.
You're right, thanks. You know, the great thing about Lewis is he has a great memory. He does, he can.
For
he-
certain things.
Yeah, for certain things, yeah. But he's really, conversation I'll have a week before, he'll know exactly what I said. It's really great.
So
Thank you. But yeah, Jordan, I was saying, you know, the campus out on a point, anytime you're out on a point, you get more of that wind, right? Like Lompoc.
He never answered your question.
No, he did. Some of them were hard to answer. And
I might have missed it.
yeah, he did. He said they had thought about it. Yeah, he didn't say why they turned it down, but he said they were thinking about it at one point.
I'm kind of bummed he didn't show us the construction that was going on.
I'll find out where that is and then I'll get the map out and we can tell where we went and at least it'll tell us where it is. And if you want to go check it out on your own, you can drive through there. I ride my bike through there. I may look for it. I think it's probably on Colegio though, you know, where they've been expanding dorms all the way down that road towards Stork Road. I would think it would be not on the main campus anywhere.
With the green board on the side of it, you guys think?
Yeah, well, I think he said that we were using the tickets.
Yeah, no, that dorm will be off campus, I think. Well, I don't know though. I'll find out. God. Was it?
The Charles Munger door?
Yeah, the Munger project. You know, the great thing about Jordan was I knew him 10 years ago. We did a tour and he was fresh out of engineering school. And I think he went to Bryn maybe and did architecture. And he was pretty towing the line. And I noticed he was a lot more critical of things and more balanced this time. I was pleasantly impressed that he had gotten more real over the years.
Older, wiser.
Yeah, you know, because the university is a mixed bag. It seems like such a great place. And I mean, it is a good place to get scholars together and to educate people. There's no doubt about that. But their footprint's too big. It's not suitable for this area. And they want to bring more in. They want to make it a lot bigger, world class. And I mean, they're doing great research and I understand the research. I think you do research without so many students, but it's really impinging on the infrastructure in the community in Goleta. Like the water treatment people said, yeah, we can handle it. We just have to add more. They've got a lot of room out there close to the airport. We'll have to, you know, we can do it. We'll have to add more and they'll pay for that. But you can't just increase your use of things because somewhere else isn't getting that. You're increasing your ecological footprint, even though you're doing it in a sustainable way. So they don't want to admit that because they want that university. And I'm pissed that Bryn doesn't talk about that more. You know, Dennis Allen wouldn't talk about it. He's the head of the Bryn administrative committee or whatever they call it, you know. And I go, yeah, I love what they're doing. They're doing everything they can within that and doing some really innovative, cool stuff. But I said, you know, it's not ecologically sustainable. And so it's not a model. And here you've got one of the top environmental schools in the country.
They should redo IOD before they do anything else.
Yeah, really. God.
I had a friend that her dorm, the hallway was literally like 2 feet wide and I could barely fit it.
Yeah. Oh,
No way anyone was passing each other.
yeah.
Just to tear that.
So the university has so much power, the UC system, that they have control over wherever the boundaries of their schools over any local municipality. So I went to a thing when Goleta was complaining, there were some complaints about a bunch of things, mostly expanding. And they pretty much said at this public forum, they said, well, look, you can either go with us because you can't oppose us because the government's on our side. You can either go with us and cause less problems, or you can fight us and lose all along the way. They pretty much said that. And I thought, Jesus Christ, something's not right here. So no institution like that should dictate what, you know, about community standards. That's really awful. So that's gonna change. I predict that. I write about that. I think that will change because we're starting to demand a lot, all in every direction now as a world. We're demanding that guys like Putin don't pull that shit anymore. We're demanding more equal rights. I mean, we're really people are starting to get pissed, That's why all the white supremacist stuff, that's why they're pissed, because they haven't been getting the goods they've been promised, just like the minorities. They've been a minority that way. They haven't been getting the goods for all this time, and they're pissed. They're taking it out in the wrong way, but it's understandable what they're doing. It's not just that they're getting replaced by minorities. They're just not getting what they've been promised by the government for 100 years. So I'd be pissed too. So, in some ways, there's really great things going on, and it's encouraging. And then you get throwbacks like the freaking